if we're discussing the definition of success within our society, I've always been a failure. I've been a failure ever since I dropped out of college, because college, that was the one point where I was actually like complying, right? Like I was going to college, I was doing the thing that was expected of me, of going to college to get a degree, to get a job, to get a job, a fucking house and insurance and a mortgage and all that stuff. So I have been a failure in society, in the eyes of society, since I'm 21 years old, since I dropped out of college, right? And so it's kind of comforting to realize like, oh, I've always been a failure in that sense. And now moving back home, like, yes, I think it's like exponentially more failure. ultimately, I don't care. I don't care. I don't give a fuck. And let me tell you why. So this is what, like, I a failure because at 28 years old, I moved back home. And my answer to that question is no, I'm not a failure. In the eyes of society, yes, I am. I am absolutely a failure in the eyes of society because I don't have a home to my name. I don't have a marriage. I don't have children. I don't have a stable job, a stable income. I don't have even a stable location. Like I don't meet the requirements of what society expects from me as a human living in society, right? And in that regard, in that definition of what is a successful person, I do not fit the bill. I have not succeeded in those specific guidelines imposed upon us as individuals, right? It's like putting a size 10 foot into a size 7 shoe and being like, oh, just be grateful you have shoes. But my feet hurt, like I can barely walk. That's a great analogy, actually. I would rather be barefoot until I find the right pair of shoes. Like being back in my home country, living with my family, being basically at ground zero, it absolutely leaves me with this consistent, nagging, reoccurring thought of like, have you failed at life? How have you failed at life? How could you fail at life? Like you literally did everything in your power to leave and you successfully were gone for almost a decade and now you're back. And now you're back and what? And what are you doing? And saying to myself, no, you're not a failure, okay? Even if in the eyes of society and in accordance to the rules and the guidelines of where you should be at this age in your life, you are a failure because you haven't met them. That doesn't mean you as a person, as a human, and your life in general is a failure. And I want to talk about that feeling specifically because obviously it's, again, as I've said, it's been nagging, it's been there, it's been very much on the tippy top of my frontal lobe and just kind of nagging and nitpicking and like whispering throughout the months because, of course, when you're in this environment, it's very much in your face, right? It's very in your face that you've moved back home, that you're living with your family, that you're kind of like not independent anymore, that you are reliant on the people you thought you would never have to be reliant on again because all you wanted to do was like move out of home, be an independent adult, be self-sufficient, take care of yourself and just live your own life. And now I'm kind of like it feels like I've taken so many steps back because I'm literally back to where I was in high school. And of course, that leaves me feeling insecure. Of course, that leaves me feeling questioning a lot of things about myself and about my life and like, how the fuck did I get myself here? And absolutely, there's going to be those nagging, whispering thoughts of like, how did you do this? Like, how could you fuck up so badly? Because I'm not like, I don't have equipment, you know what I mean? I just have the iPhone and I have these wire headphones, which is more than a lot of people have. So I'm going to shut the fuck up and be grateful for what I have. And that was a great learning opportunity there. I never expected to be the person that moved back home in her late 20s after living abroad and living alone and like hyper independent for all of those years. Well, for the most part. And it's not for the reasons you think. It's not like I never saw myself being one of those people because I looked down on people that moved home at a certain age into their adulthood. It wasn't anything of judgment or like comparison. It had a lot to do specifically with the country where my home is because it's not really like a home to me and it's not a place I enjoy being and it's not a place I ever saw myself returning to like in any capacity, even visiting, because politically speaking, there's a lot of, I can't really say a lot while I'm here. There's no like evidence and proof that they actually listen to the things you say, but I would rather not take the risk for my safety, even though, again, I don't even think it's that dramatic, but you never know, and I'd rather just not risk it. I just never, ever saw myself moving back here because this was the last place I ever wanted to end up full stop. And I think I obviously can't speak for the people that move back to their homes and their home country or their home city or town or whatever, and they actually don't have like they don't maybe necessarily have like a deep rooted disdain for the place where they grew up, and maybe they have healthy relationships with their family, and so it's not that big of like a issue in regards to like being in that environment. It's obviously, I think it takes a toll on you in relation to how you perceive your future to be and where you feel you should be at the certain age, and like being back at home living with your parents is like not the place you would expect to be at a certain point in your adulthood. But for me, it's like that on top of the fact that I don't like this place. I did everything in my power after high school to leave. This was my dream, like my literal like teenagehood long dream was to leave this place, was to leave this country as soon as I could. And genuinely, as soon as I graduated high school, like the summer following, I left. Like I packed my shit and I moved, and I was really proud of that. And I've since then I've just been kind of like moving around in search of what at the time I didn't realize what exactly I was searching for. I think I was just like being moved from place to place, guided by my intuition. And I don't look back and feel any sense of regret with having such like an unstable life or like unstable 20s, because ultimately I genuinely know for a fact that every single one of those chapters contributed to me evolving into the version of myself that I am today, that I'm meant to be, that I'm genuinely like so thrilled, excited, and happy to be. I have a very long history with like intrusive thoughts and negativity and having a lot of like limiting beliefs about myself, and I've been working through that over the years of replacing that negative self-talk with positive self-talk and replacing the self-hatred with self-love. And it's been a journey, to say the least, and I've made so much progress in the years since I've started doing that consciously that I honestly don't feel like where I'm at now I'm like so behind or anything in that regard, because genuinely I'm still capable of getting myself out of those thoughts. I feel like it's just like this constant question of like, have I actually failed? Because, you know, I can catch myself at the negative thoughts, I could catch myself at the negative self-talk, and I can catch my ego, I can catch sort of like the instilled beliefs that society has ingrained within me in regards to like who I should be as a person, where I should be at this age, what I should be doing with my life, what I shouldn't be doing, where I shouldn't be. And right, like in the eyes of society and in accordance to those rules, I shouldn't be back home. I shouldn't be living with my mom. I shouldn't be back in my childhood bedroom. Do you know what I mean? When I've literally done everything to leave. And so obviously those thoughts are going to come up because I'm ingrained with those beliefs. And even though I can catch myself in that overthinking thought, like that pervasive thought, and stop myself from ingesting it too deeply and really believing the content, it does obviously, like I can't really be that person that completely just throws it out of the window and says, no, this isn't true, bye. Like I have to ask the question, I have to sit with it, I still have to, you know, kind of like ask myself, where is this coming from? What is the root of this? Because I am that bitch that's like, what is the root of this thought? What is the root of this belief, of this insecurity? Where is this coming from? We must get to the source and we must heal from within, because I am just that kind of a bitch. Like when it comes to healing the insecurities, the beliefs, whatever, the life lessons, like I guess you could say I'm like that kind of a spiritual bitch. But not that I make it my whole identity, I swear, but I've really just like over the years programmed, I think, myself so strongly to always ask the questions and get to the bottom of every single lingering thought and insecurity and belief and fear and you know, like spiral and mental spiral. And so I've obviously sat with that question for several months now of like, have I failed? Am I a failure as a person because at 28 years old, I moved back home? Nothing. I genuinely have nothing to my name except my belongings. I have no plans. I have no ideas. Like it's so uncertain. And I remember thinking that when I was living in Australia and I didn't know where I was going next, I thought that was the most uncertain I'd ever felt in my life about my future. Fast forward, here I am now, actually, at least like I'm somewhere. And I still feel like I feel the most uncertain and unsure I've ever felt in my life. And it's a very interesting position to be in, and I feel like the universe in a really weird way has been like preparing me to come to this point of like ultimate and complete uncertainty, because only having been in this point in this position in my life can I entirely surrender control, which is something I have struggled with my whole life, of like needing to have control, needing to have certainty, just like needing to know for my own safety, like mental safety within myself, of like, okay, I know what the next step is. I can take a breath, because there's been a lot of uncertainty in my upbringing, and I know the traumas that it stems from. I know the like insecurity where it comes from. Like I know the source and everything, but it doesn't change the fact that it's still how my brain is wired. It's how the threat detection in my amygdala is functioning. It's what it is like kind of working to detect and prevent me from falling into those situations again, in an attempt to defend myself and protect myself, which I appreciate and I admire. And I think, as angry as I can be with my brain for kind of making it really hard to change things about myself and about my beliefs and about the way that I just exist and think on a daily basis, I understand that it comes from a place of like self-preservation, and that is ultimately the brain's job, amongst obviously like many other things that it does for us. But like one of its key factors, key roles, responsibilities is to keep us alive, is to keep us surviving, right? And not surviving in like I don't want to say it in like a surviving, fight or flight mode, but more in like a to keep us alive, right? To keep us going. And so I really do appreciate my brain for that, but it doesn't change the fact that it's still obviously really challenging in a world where we don't have the same threats that we used to, that I think the brain is kind of like more equipped to handle and deal with, versus like my fear of putting videos out on the internet because I'm scared of what other people are going to think about me, because of my underlying fear of rejection that stems from the trauma of losing my father when I was a teenager. So it's like the brain doesn't really, it's not really like evolved, I think, for that. So it's just such a funny situation, because I'm like, you're trying to keep me alive, but like even the worst case scenario of this thing happening that like I fear wouldn't actually even harm me, let alone kill me. Do we understand? I think the fucked up thing is like I've always known I was never going to be the person that fits into the world's set view of how I'm supposed to live as a human. I feel like I need to find a way to articulate it better when I'm saying like society's expectations, because I feel like I just reuse that one over and over and I just sound repetitive. I've always known that. And I think over the years, I've allowed myself to become more and more okay with that realization and more secure with that knowing, because I think for a really long time, I was too afraid to really acknowledge that I'm never going to fit into the box, even though I feel it would have been so much easier on my nervous system and just like in general if I could just fit into the box, because then I wouldn't have people in life kind of, I don't want to say nagging, because I know when it comes from like friends and family, it does come from a loving and concerned place, because they probably look at my life and they're like, okay, when is this girl going to get her shit together and just like do the things that are expected of her, because they're doing the things that are expected of them. And it's like, I don't really have a lot of friends that do not comply with society's boxes, and that's fine. I don't want to sound like I'm a person that judges or undermines or thinks less of people that fit into the boxes and have those lives that sort of do comply with the expectations placed upon us from birth. But I'm not one of those people, and that's just something that's obviously really difficult to navigate when you don't have a lot of support and you don't have people telling you that it's okay if you don't fit into those boxes. And on the other hand, you have people that are kind of like trying to nudge you in the direction of fitting into a box, of just like getting into any of the boxes. Like, okay, like what kind of jobs would you want? Like I've heard a lot of my friends kind of try and direct me into that of like starting to look for a job, starting to think about what career path would you like to take. And like, again, I know it comes from loving, considerate places. However, it doesn't change the fact that like, I think it's just for those people, they know that there's sort of this expected way of living life, and they are capable of living those, like fitting into those boxes, right? And so when they look at me, somebody that isn't doing that, they kind of think to themselves like, oh my God, like poor girl, or like, oh, why isn't she, like what's going on? Is she okay? Is she going through something? Like this is abnormal, like we need to help her. And I get where they're coming from, because they're so conditioned and they're also capable of actually living that life. Like I think there's obviously a really large population there's a really large percentage of the population that doesn't have a problem getting a normal job, you know, getting married, having kids, because they want those things, right? They've always, you know, it's never necessarily made them feel like they never felt forced into that way of living. They genuinely wanted to and felt comfortable and moved in that direction of life, and they're happy within it. Maybe not all the times, but you know, they found contentness and they found their peace within that. But with me, it's always been so strongly, like I've always been so strongly resistant towards that life path. And again, not having a lot of people in my life that are the same way as me in that regard has been really, really challenging, because it's made me feel like, is there something really wrong with me? Like, am I just the one person out of all these people I know that has something like up with her brain, because she can't comply, because she can't go and just get a job, and she can't just like go and start dating someone for marriage sake, and like wanting to have kids, and wanting to live in one place and just like stay there, and get a mortgage on a house. It's like I've just never had that. And it's been a long time coming, but I think it's still like a little bit of work is still left, but I've ultimately confidently can say I've come to the point of like I'm really certain, and I'm comfortable, and I'm confident in the knowing that I will never be a member of this society that fits into those boxes imposed upon me by society, by capitalism, by the government, by the structures of our world, right? And by the structures of our cultures, you know, individually, whichever one you come from, like the one that I come from, even not even the one that I come from, the one, it's like I've lived in 6 countries, and in all of those countries, there's been those overlapping themes of marriage, parenthood, job stability, location stability, housing, car, mortgage, insurance, whatever, like all that kind of stuff, right? So it's kind of everywhere. Like it's very pervasive in most parts of the world. I can't really speak for the parts of the world I haven't been to and lived in. And again, I've only really lived in Western countries. So that's where my experience comes from. And I am a Western person, I guess you can kind of tell, but I've made my peace. There's obviously still like feelings within me of, are you sure? Like, is there something wrong with you? Maybe we need to sit down. Maybe we need to reevaluate. But it's like, I know for a fact there's nothing wrong with me just because I don't fit into these molds. And there's nothing wrong with society, so to say, but it's just like, I don't have to fit into these boxes to feel fulfilled and to feel like I have the right to exist and live my life how I live it. And that redirects back to this place that I'm in of being 28, moving back home, not knowing where my future's going, not having any certainty with anything, and ultimately like having had this question on my mind for several months now of like, am I really a failure? Like, have I actually failed? And ultimately realizing like, in the eyes of society, yes, I have, but I'm okay with that. There's nothing wrong with that. I never ever actually was living my life in accordance to what society expected of me in the first place. Like, yes, I would have jobs here and there, but they weren't like serious jobs, right? They weren't like real jobs, right? What people would in a stereotypical definition define as real jobs. And so I wasn't ever actually, I was technically in the eyes of like those expectations, I was always a failure. I was always a failure because I was always moving from one country to another country. I wasn't dating. The prospects of kids were never even in sight. I was quitting jobs here and there because I wasn't happy. I would just leave. I was working not really real jobs, like hospitality, gastronomy kind of jobs. So I've been a failure my whole adulthood in that regard. It's what made me realize this whole like answer to the question of whether or not I'm a failure at 28 for moving back home. I have attended an Indian wedding in India, driven mopeds around Indonesian islands with no license and no experience whatsoever, and I haven't crashed or harmed anyone. I've been camping to a national park in Australia where wombats tore up our tent because we left food inside and ate most of the food. We learned our lesson the hard way. I've taken psychedelics for the first time in Amsterdam. I've been to Amsterdam, did a 2-week road trip around the entire country of Austria. When I was 16 years old, I went to Rome, and because my grandmother was living there, so I got to stay with her for a month, and she was working 6 days out of the week. So for those 6 days out of the week, I got to roam around Rome all on my own. I literally could go wherever I want. At 16, I got to just walk around one of the most beautiful, ancient, historical cities in the world however I wanted, for like wherever, like literally whatever the fuck I wanted. And I remember 2 weeks in, I got so bored because I was completely by myself for the most part. So I was like, oh my God, like I would love some friends, right? But like to have that experience at 16. When I was 18, I went to the United States and I stayed with family friends in Connecticut and I worked as a waitress. And then on my days off, I would take the M train into Manhattan and I would spend the whole day in Manhattan just walking literally around the city. I remember one time I walked all the way from the top of Harlem, no, from the top, I walked all the way from the top of Central Park near Harlem, all the way down to the fucking, what's it called? Lowtown, the bottom the bottom of the city. My thighs were so chafed, I remember, because oh my God, I did not wear the right shorts and it was like summer. But it was worth it. When I was 19, I graduated high school and I bought myself flight tickets to Paris and tickets to Lollapalooza Paris to see The Weeknd, Lana Del Rey, Imagine Dragons, and a bunch of other artists, and go to Paris for the first time in my life. This is money that I had saved from my waitressing back in Connecticut because the tips were good. I've lived in 6 countries, 4 of which I moved to completely on my own as an adult. I spent 3 weeks in Vienna staying with a friend, and I got to go to like a really traditional Austrian sort of like gala ball where they all, like, the girls had to wear the traditional dindel, I don't know how to say it, dresses, and the boys had to wear like the lederhosen stocking buckle thingies. I don't know. Look it up. Austrian traditional like mountain clothes, right? And I got to wear one of those dresses, and I got to go to one of these parties, and I got drunk, and we were dancing, and we were having such a ball. I got to attend that event. I've gotten to dance at some of the world's most renowned techno clubs when I was living in Berlin. Like, literally got into Berghain first time I went. I've been to Trezor, I've been to Kit Kat, I've been to RSO, I've lived in Australia twice. Like, the first time I attempted to move to Australia, COVID happened, so I had to leave after a month, but I got to spend a month there, and I did the Great Ocean road trip. And then the second time, 5 years later, I moved back because I was like, fuck COVID for taking that away from me. Not to be ungrateful, and like, at least I have my health and everything, so I'm not like complaining about COVID, please. But just in that sense, like, COVID kind of took that away from me. So I told myself, no, I'm gonna move back one day. I'm gonna move back to Australia. And 5 years later, I did, and I moved back to the same city. I moved back to Melbourne, Australia, and I spent a year living there. There's a bunch of like little moments that obviously like I can't recall right now, but those are just some of the big ones. Like, those are some of the big things that I have experienced in my life at the age of 28. And like, to sit here for the past like several months genuinely questioning and wondering and really like believing to an extent that I was a failure, that I am a failure as a person, because at the age of 28 I don't have a secure, stable, normal job, because I don't have a long-term relationship that is looking like the pursuit of marriage is on the horizon, because I don't want to have children, or don't have children to begin with, and I don't want them, because I don't have a college education, because what else? Because I don't have an apartment or a house to my name or a mortgage with my name on it. I don't have a car. I don't even have a driver's license, okay? And to think that those are the things that measure my success and accomplishment in life, and that like that makes me literally sit here and question like whether or not I have actually accomplished anything with my life. And then I stop and I think about all of the things that I have witnessed, all the places I have been, all of the people that I have met, all of the foods that I've eaten, all of the things that I've witnessed, like the experiences, like the bodies of water that I've swam in, like the fucking roads I've driven by, the animals I've seen and touched and just like been witness to, the love I've experienced, the connection, the amount of laughter, like, oh my God, how much I've laughed throughout my life. It's absolutely insane. And the fact that I'm not even 30 and I've already had all of these phenomenal, incredible experiences in my life, and I still sit here and I think to myself, and I question whether or not I failed at life at 28. How fucking dare I, and how fucking dare society make me feel like I am not an accomplished human being just because I don't fit into the boxes that it has created, that it has literally are man-made boxes that we feel we have to contort ourselves into. When I really sit with it and I really think about it and I really am like, oh my God, like that's fucking crazy, that just because society told me that because I don't have these certain things and I don't live my life this certain set way, I have failed as a human and I should feel ashamed and I should feel embarrassed and I should just give up and I should just like do anything in my power to get myself on the road of fitting into those boxes now while I still have the chance, because I'm still young and I can still find a man and I can, get pregnant because I'm young enough to get pregnant, even though it's not the egg that depletes with age, it's the man's fucking sperm that gets shittier. All right, do some fucking research. But of course they want the women to be more afraid and to have kids sooner. That way they're trapped. That way they're entrapped by this fucking child. You'll never get me fucking trapped with a child. I swear to God, I'll kill that child. Like, not to be dramatic, but no. Okay, that was a bit dramatic. I'm not going to kill a child, okay? I'm not a child killer. Adoption is always an option. Adoption is always an option. Wow, that rhymes. And look, I don't want to make it seem like, obviously I know a lot of the things I've experienced in my lifetime. It's not what a lot of people by my age have experienced. And I don't want to make anyone feel like, okay, they moved back home and they haven't even experienced like all of these other things that I've experienced. And so like, you must be more of a failure. But it's like, we all have situations and circumstances and relationships that we've experienced that have brought us joy, that have brought us fulfillment, that have brought us experience, which ultimately, in my opinion, is the point of life, is just experience, to experience this life, that have made you feel, to some extent, content and happy and secure and that feeling of like, life is worth living. Do you know what I mean? It's like certain concerts usually people say are the things that make people feel like, oh, this life is worth living, or this is what life is supposed to be, supposed to feel like. And emphasize for myself, because ultimately I do kind of create these videos as like a self journal, but also I hope the contents of it can kind of relate with other people, because I think I think a very large percentage of people in their late 20s have this feeling of like, I'm approaching 30 and I don't have anything figured out and I don't have any of the things society told me I need to have in order to be living life the right way, right? And to be a fulfilled human being on this earth. And it's like, you just really have to remind yourself, all of that, like all of those boxes, all of those ideas, all of those definitions are literally made up. Like, they're all made up, and I'm not saying that it doesn't matter at all and you should just disregard completely, because you still live in this society that expects these things of you, and you obviously still need to pay rent and buy food and clothe yourself, and you still want to go on vacations and go out with friends, and you need that kind of like financial support. And we do live in a world where you are supposed to work and abide by capitalism in order to support yourself, which is fucking crazy. But hey, I don't feel like I really have advice for people necessarily of how to stop stressing about this feeling of fitting into society. And if you don't, something's wrong with you, and you failed and you're a failure, because it's like, that's to each their own in regards to like how strongly they are instilled with those beliefs, and also what kind of a family and surroundings you have, and perhaps your culture, perhaps your surround, like what your parents ingrained within you. Like, it's one thing when you have parents that kind of support you pursuing it's one thing when you have parents and family that support you in pursuing your dreams, even if those dreams don't necessarily align with, again, the expected path, the expected road to take. And that kind of makes it a bit easier. But then when you don't, and you have parents that are sort of pressuring you and making you feel like a failure and reminding you, like, having parents that kind of tell you like, oh, you're a disappointment of a child because you haven't done this thing, you haven't accumulated this much money, you haven't gotten this type of a job, and you're this age, and like, what are you doing with your life? I can only imagine that like obviously facilitates the feelings of insecurity even stronger. But I think that's why it's really important to know what kind of a life you want for yourself, like what it is you're looking for from your life. What are you trying to gain from this experience that you've been given as this human being on this earth in this time that we're living in? And I think having that like North Star, I think, is the appropriate fits, right? Having that North Star to always look back to whenever the feelings of insecurity and fear and a failure come up, is to remind yourself like, But I don't want that life. Like, I know I would be miserable. And even if everyone around me would be happy because I'm finally conforming, I would be miserable. And I really had to, because I was a chronic people pleaser in the past and I just wanted people to accept me. And I just did everything I could to please others and to make other people feel proud of myself because I ultimately didn't feel proud of myself. And I thought other people could give me that feeling. I just wanted to do whatever I could. And so, in the eyes of like my family and certain friends, it was like if I went down this path, if I did what was expected of me, then I would receive these things. And I just wanted to do that to make others happy. But it was like there was so much resistance. And no matter how hard I tried, which honestly it wasn't really that hard, but to an extent, like I did try, and it just wasn't working. Rebuilding my relationship with myself, I kind of like reinstilled that feeling of pride within myself where I don't need other people to be proud of me anymore. It only matters to me that I'm proud of myself. And so if other people look at me and think, "Oh my God, like what is she doing with her life? She's a loser, she's failing, like she's going to end up broke, alone, like with 7 cats, like she's just not going to have a good life if she's going to keep doing this." Like that doesn't matter to me anymore because I don't put emphasis on other people's opinions about myself and my life any longer because again, I have put in so much work to redirect the emphasis and importance onto myself, onto my opinions, onto my feelings, my beliefs, my pride, my joy, my fulfillment, and whatever anyone else has to say, that has nothing to do with me. And I think that's like step number one is really like you have to understand that obviously we're born into a society where we kind of don't have the upper hand because we're already born into this world that we don't fit into naturally. Not because there's anything wrong with us, but because there's something wrong with the world, in my opinion. Even though, again, it's like this world can function the way it functions to an extent, and there will be people that always fit into those boxes. But it's like we still live in a world where we look at people that don't fit into the box and we think there's something wrong with them. Even though it's usually those people that are the one that give something of meaning and importance. It's usually the artists, right? The actors, the musicians. Like they didn't follow the traditional path. But it's like we rely on those kinds of people with their talent, their art, their purpose or whatever to give us meaning. I don't know what I'm saying anymore, and I don't want to like come off insulting or undermining other people, but it's like if you really think about it, like actors and musicians, for example, they did not follow the traditional path, and I'm sure they got a lot of like hate for it from their friends and family, but eventually they ended up succeeding, and then now like people rely on them for their music, for their movies, for their acting. They go to their concerts. Like it's like, okay, you're actually fine, you fit in, but you fit into this other box that we've created as well. So it's like it's this never ending cycle of like always needing to put people in a box, otherwise there's something wrong with them, they're outcasts, and because we can't place them, it's almost like we don't feel comfortable around them, and we have to like exile them somehow, and we have to make them feel shit about themselves. We have to undermine them. We have to remind them how much of a failure they are in order to kind of like almost pressure them into going into these certain boxes that they should have gone to in the first place, but they were like reluctant to. But then ultimately it's like because of the pressure of society, of their family, of their friends, whatever, the nagging, the ridicule, whatever, it's like a lot of people give in and they just do it. And then they end up like miserable and unhappy. And yeah, it's kind of like that's the path it always ends up going down. I know that that would be the case for me. And I'm really fortunate that I came to that realization, I think, relatively early on. Obviously, it still took time for me to really trust it and know it for certain and to acknowledge that that path would be a lot worse for me in the long run than the path that I'm on now, where it's like in the short run, in the short term, it seems bad, it looks bad for myself from the perspective of others potentially, but I know in the long run it's going to be so much better for me than if I were to go down the traditional path and make everyone around me feel happy because I've finally chosen a box and I've put myself in this box and I fit into a box. And then nobody has to worry about me, right? I'm doing the things that are expected of me. But then ultimately I'm going to be depressed. I already know I'm going to be depressed because you're shoving me into a box I was never meant to be shoved into. I don't fit into this box. And there have been a lot of times in my life where I've thought, oh, wouldn't it be so nice if I could just have a box, if I could just fit into a box, and then I wouldn't have these feelings and these insecurities and this fear mongering and this feeling of lack and of failure within myself, and having all these people in my life kind of like think less of me, ridicule me, shame me, whatever. And again, a lot of that isn't even legit. It's just like how I feel they're thinking of me, right? It's like my own self projecting that I'm putting onto my friends. And so it's really, oh, I lost where I was going with that one. I just talk and I record these videos, whatever they end up being. I don't think there's ever really a point. I think I'm just expressing my thoughts and my feelings about a certain situation I'm going through in the current moment of my life. And really now it's moving back home at 28 and feeling like, what am I doing with my life? Like, where am I going? What's happening? And obviously a lot of insecurities and fears around that. Ultimately, it's going to be okay. I'm going to be okay because I know who I am. I know what I kind of want out of life. Like, I know what I'm looking for, not to the exact extent. And I think that's also been a reason as to why it's been a bit more challenging for me throughout life, because I needed to have so much control. I needed to know what I was doing. I needed to have some kind of a certainty. Otherwise, I just felt scared, and I just felt like it's going to end badly if I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. And that's on me having a default worst case scenario thought process or thinking, because it obviously always leads me to thinking every single thing is going to end badly unless I take control, unless I can predict, unless I can somehow insert myself and facilitate making it in a way that I can foresee, right? And I can be happy with to an extent. Like, it was almost like I'll take anything that's like at least like meets my bare minimum, so long as I know what I'm expecting beforehand. And that way it's making me feel safe and it's making me feel regulated. Otherwise, like, completely just saying I trust that the good things are going to come no matter what they're like, I'm just like throwing my hat into the wind, being like, expect the unexpected and know that it's going to be good no matter what. And I have no expectations. I have no idea how it's going to turn out, but I trust that it will. And it will be so much better than I could have ever imagined. I never had that ability. I never had that capacity because of how strongly I needed to have at least an semblance of control. And because I couldn't relinquish full control, I could never have situations and circumstances come into my life that were unexpectedly beautiful, right? And, better than I could have ever imagined, because in order for that to happen, I can't have had imagined anything in the first place. But I can't do that. I have to imagine. I have to imagine to an extent, because that gives me control. And I have needed control for my whole life. And being home, moving back to this country, I feel like that looks like an angel wing. That's crazy. Moving back home and being here for the first time in a really long time, it's like I ultimately have no control, because I'm in the one place I genuinely never thought I would end up. Like, genuinely, I was so confident and sure of the fact that I would never end up back here. And never say never, I guess. But it's really made me realize that I don't have control. I don't have even nearly as much control as I would have liked to believe, in order to, again, give myself that reassurance and feeling of safety and illusionary, imaginary safety. And so I think in that, there's a lot of positives that are coming out of this situation for me, on like a mental scale of like what I'm learning about myself and about my life. And that has been one of them, of just ultimately really seeing in real time, in real life, in action, that I don't have any control. So let me just stop. Like, let me just not give up, but let me stop fighting. Let me stop fighting for the control. Like, let me stop trying to get my foot in the door. Be like, let me be a part of this. Like, let me insert myself. Let me help. But it's like, no, we don't need your fucking help. We need you to shut the fuck up and just sit down and breathe and relax and stop rushing, because I'm always fucking rushing. Like, this is another thing I have a problem with, or I used to have a problem with, of feeling like I needed to, like, I was always in a hurry. I was always in a rush. I always felt behind. because it's like I was like running against the clock. And I feel like that's a topic I really don't want to talk about right now because I've already been yapping for an hour. And I get really like red in the face and a bit like, ooh, because I talk so much. Oh, so much talking. Ugh.